Welcome to the visual div. Ailín, how you doing?
Good, Mattchew. How are you?
Mattchew. It was funny. The first time I ordered a coffee when I arrived in Dublin, 4 years ago, I had to say my name, and then they called out my name, and it was Mattchew.
Yeah,
I was like, no, it's Matthew. Come on, guys. And then,
there's different THs in Ireland, yeah.
yeah, my wife, we used to live in Wandsworth in London, and she used to call it the Thames.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the Irish tend to pick and choose when they use th and when they use t, and it's like the exact opposite of the UK. So when we
yeah.
use
So
th,
if you're in
we use t.
if you're in Tala in Dublin, which is like southwest Dublin, they would say da instead of that. So
Yeah,
they move the TH to the end of that. So yeah,
yeah.
it's tendency.
And you say tree.
Tree, duh, that,
Yeah, whereas
this.
Aoife's from Mayor, she says three, and you say tree.
Yeah, I've known. And then my folks are from the Midlands, and they instead of book and cook, they'd say book and kook. So it would be a kook book.
Kook book. It's very similar to the UK. I don't know, because I don't speak other languages, I don't know when I go to other countries the local accents, let's say. I know in America there's lots of variations across states, but I don't know how tight it is. I know we've spoken about this before, but if you walk literally 10 minutes down the road here, the accent will be completely different. Obviously, the less people there are, the wider the spread. But in Wales, like, you go to the next village and it'd be different. So people know where people are from in a kind of like 2 square mile because of their accents. Is mad.
Oh, like different housing estates have different accents in towns.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, and the snobbery as well. The accent snobbery is so off the chart real.
Yeah,
It's
both
just
directions. Like both, like
both directions. Like I would say my wife is probably like in the snobbery scale. She's in the middle because she goes up and down. It's like if you live in South Dublin, where lots of the rich people live, she's snobbery to what she can pick that accent up D4. Okay.
yeah, you pick it
And
out.
then if it's like the North Dublin where it's different again, it'd be like then they're the dubs, and then the South dubs are the D4s, and it's just mad. It's just madness how much snobbery is on, and it's just they say hand actions and facial expressions are ways we communicate without actually communicating. We're not trying to. Accents are the same, especially in Ireland. It's like people read so much into an accent, and they could be the smartest, kindest. They could be your soulmate, and because they have like a really broad Cork accent that you can't understand, they get judged. It's madness.
Yeah, well, there definitely is like there definitely is a bit of snobbery. There's always snobbery with people, but also there's a lot of yeah. You can read a lot about where someone's from and where they're living and what they're doing. Actually, what I think is the funniest. I was about to say what I think is gas, which translation is what I think is really funny, is when someone moves somewhere. So like if you've got a buddy at college, you're with these group of people in college, and then you move to two different parts of Ireland, and then you meet up again. They'll be saying things differently to what you understand. Yeah. Like I've a buddy down in Cork, and he's a physiotherapist, and his wife is also a physiotherapist, and she's from Cork, but he's from Carlow. Carlow is like Midlands on the way halfway between Dublin and Cork. And he now says, go on. And in this kind of encouraging way that if you're talking to him, you'd be like, oh yeah, go on. And so like, and it's this real Cork saying, and he's now picked it up, but he doesn't have a Cork accent. It's very funny.
Hey, I'm in the same boat. I go home to my mum now, and I
You're
say,
Mattchew.
I'm Matthew. Yeah, hey mum, it's Matthew. Matthew's home. No, I'm. Yeah, you're in a cafe, and you're one over there.
Yeah.
And she says, sorry. I said, you're one over there. She said, what's you won? What's you won? What's you won? I said, you won over there, which means the person over there. Well, it means
The woman.
the woman over there.
Yeah.
And then I'd go, all right, and your man over there. It's like, well, do you know him? He's your man. No, mum, he's your man. Like, come on, it's just the guy over there. And you start to realize that I've picked up so much stuff in the last 4 years just by my wife and her family and her friends. But yeah,
So I have a first or second time I went traveling. I was down the south of France, and I met these Aussies, and they had a camper van, and I was staying in this hostel in Anglet, which is like Biarritz, Hossegor on the coast. Whatever was going on, we were hanging out in the camper van, and I started talk. I just said to the Aussie, this lad, it's like, oh, your man behind the bar said this, that, and the other, and the Aussie was like, what the fuck you saying? I'm like, your man, your man behind. He's like, he's not my fucking man. He got so offended. He thought that I was like, I don't know, saying that he was hooking up with this guy. He got really annoyed. I was like, I don't know what I've done wrong here.
I can imagine that's the thing Tim from Tasmania would say. He'd be like, yeah, hey, he's not my man. But it's the same with I remember going traveling, and I don't know what it is in Ireland, but you have flip-flops. You wear flip-flops to the beach, or flip-flops into around the bathroom or whatever. And then you arrive in Australia and they're thongs.
Tongues.
Tongs. Yeah, geez, I don't know how you guys get around the place. It's a different language, I tell you. But then you go to New Zealand and it's not thongs, it's jandals.
Mm.
So now you get like, I need to get a pair of thongs, because you've been in Australia, so you kind of pick up the lingo there. And you don't say flip-flops a lot in the UK because you don't wear flip-flops very often. So and then you get to New Zealand, it's like jandals. And then you, like 2 years later, you returned back to the UK and said, I need to get a pair of jandals. What are you talking about?
And they're claquettes in France. Well, they were 20 years ago when I was there.
And what's the new ones with the not thongs? They just all the GA players wear them before. Sliders, yeah. Anyway, chat. What we were going to talk to, like Ailín and I, don't we? We have a discussion, maybe a couple of messages, what we're going to talk about, and it's not very planned, but we thought we came up across the idea of, should we explore the benefits, pros and cons of using these new AI tools, let's call them assistants, AI assistants like ChatGPT and Claude, versus pre-built libraries like FinSuite, JetBoost, VDX, even just ad hoc code snippets to add sort of non-standard elements to Webflow. So we're mainly talking about like interactions and delightful stuff that's probably based around JavaScript, but the two approaches that tend to happen at the moment is you get, you come along, let's take an example, is let's table of contents. So you want to put a table of contents into your blog so that when any of your clients write a blog post and they obviously put their headers in and format it the way they want, a table of contents appears on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and it links to the right area of the site, and it has different styling or whatever. So maybe 2 years ago, you would search for table of contents clonable, let's say, and you might maybe find that as a clonable, and you go in the clonable and you'd either copy and paste it into your own project, or you'd look behind the scenes and see how they've done it. If you're lucky, there would be like a YouTube video explaining how they've done it. So you like copy the script here, and you wouldn't really know what's in the script. You copy it into your project and you put it, format it all like that, and it would just work. And then obviously the other guys like FinSuite came along and they create they're famous now, FinSuite attributes library, where they've put a load of JavaScript onto a CDN, and then they use, in their case, attributes to target certain things that relate to the JavaScript that make the things on the page do what you want them to do. And they had some documentation. Now, wind on probably to last year and going into this year, now you have ChatGPT, Claude, where as someone who doesn't really do a lot of JavaScript writing, you can just spell it out, say, hey, ChatGPT, I would like a table of contents that does this, 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 this. Help me out. And it would give it all to you. You'd take all the JavaScript, stick it in your head, and then you'd stick all the attributes into the page. If you tell it to put attributes in, or it might use classes, or it might use IDs, or it might, whatever it tells you to do, and you can finesse it, and you do it that way. And obviously, there's lots of different ways you can do it, but there's pros and cons doing both. And given that you have actually created your own library, so you created Visual DX, it'd be good to go into like, what I'm thinking, maybe do we start by like, why did you create Visual DX in the first place? And then we can maybe compare it against some things that I do when I use Visual DX and I use FinSuite attributes and I use JetBoost, but sometimes I also reach for Claude and use Claude to help me out as well. But yeah, like VDX, like first of all, explain what VDX is. Why did you start it? And was it kind of filling a gap that you needed at the time?
Why? Okay, I didn't expect to actually start talking about Visual DX, but Visual DX is, when I start, is kind of a front end library of JavaScript snippets that are triggered by attributes. And it came about, the idea of it came about because I really enjoy working with HTMX. So HTMX, we did a pod on it ages ago. It's like an enhancement of HTML without using JavaScript. But its power really comes from using a backend. So the way I used HTMX a lot in Webflow to create deep nesting of CMS items, for one, made tabs out of it. I never got to figure out how to make a slider, but things that the Webflow CMS wouldn't allow us to do with elements, I was able to figure out using HTMX. But then the more I explored HTMX and the more I got into HTMX, I realized it was overpowered for what I wanted, because I just wanted a front end library, because Webflow is a front end. If I want to start integrating a back end, HTMX is incredibly powerful, but I felt it was too powerful for what I needed. And the idea of HTMX is that they kind of claim that you'll never have to write JavaScript again, which it's a big claim. It's not accurate, but if you're a back-end developer, if you're a PHP developer, a Python developer, it does really bridge that gap of not needing a JavaScript front-end JavaScript developer to do a lot of things.
Because it is a JavaScript library.
It is a JavaScript library, yeah.
But you don't use JavaScript to interact with it. You use attributes in the HTML, and that's the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, when someone says, "Oh, React is a JavaScript library," well, of course it is, but you're writing JavaScript when you're using the library, whereas HTMX is almost like a reference library in the same way that FinSuite attributes use a load of JavaScript as a reference and then use attributes to reference that library, let's call it.
Yeah, so they use HTMX uses attributes to allow you do things in the exact same way as FinSuite allows you do things using attributes, and so does Refocus and JetBoost and MemberStack, and a lot of the ecosystem of Webflow enhancement uses attributes. So HTMX was like, for me, the next kind of step of adding enhancement to Webflow, and also very different to React. You can just add a CDN. So you just copy a script, you put it into your head, and you've got the full HTMX library. You can, if you use a backend, you can use NPN and you can load HTMX to your stack. But if you're just using Webflow, you put it into the head, and now you've got the power of all the capabilities of HTMX, which again, the more I used it, it was too powerful, and too powerful in the wrong direction for front-end stuff. When I was using HTMX, one of the things I looked for was a back button. I was like, why doesn't HTMX have a back button? And then I started...
What do you mean by a back button, just to clarify?
So you can, if you go from page A to page B, you can have the browser stores the history of page A. And you can have a tiny snippet of JavaScript that you can put into a button. You can either have it inline or you can have it in a script. And if you click that button, it goes back to the last page visited. And it's only a couple of lines of code. And with HTMX, I was like, why don't they have a back button? And I ended up having to use JavaScript to create a back button, but it became more complicated because I was using HTMX. I had to write JavaScript specific for HTMX. So the idea of not using JavaScript became completely void because I was using more JavaScript in order to do a really simple thing that I wanted. And then I started thinking about other simple things, front end things that happen in Webflow that I would like to explore, or why they don't exist. Like, one of the things that doesn't exist in Webflow is you can't have a native footer year. And you do have one of the first things I ever used from FinSuite was their what did I call them? Hacks, a FinSuite hack for adding a year to your footer. So I was just like, this should be a CDN. And why can't a back button be in the exact same CDN? CDN is a script, the exact same script, and they just trigger by attributes because they're so lightweight, they're tiny, they're not going to have, they will have an effect, but the effect on your website is going to be minimal. And then with building out the footer year, I was like, well, now I need a month. Now I need a day. Now I need to be able to have month in long format and short format. Now I need month to be its word and its
Okay,
number.
so
And
let's
then the
stop you
idea
there.
just kept growing.
Stop me there quickly. Okay, so that the inspiration was because you were coming up against requirements in your project that you needed to solve. Okay,
With things
and
I wanted to do fast.
things, yeah, okay. But so a counter to that would be if I need footer year, and it happened, and it's all over Twitter and LinkedIn. What last week, the week before was. Remember, guys, if you update your footer, but never do it again, put this little script in.
Yeah.
So everyone's going, well, I did it last year, or what a great idea. And you go around updating all your client sites with this thing. And, when the client comes, opens their browser next year in 2026 and goes, boom, it's updated. And they go, Matt put that in. Oh, smart guy, Matt. Yeah, brilliant. But all it takes is, well, maybe the footer year is a bad example, but you can go on LinkedIn and Twitter and find a little script.
Yeah, it's
You
only
can,
about 6 or 7 lines of code maximum. Like, it's a tiny little script. It's not.
and it's a relatively basic JavaScript function. It's you don't have to be a whiz bang JavaScript codey to understand it. So I would go, well, if I didn't know any JavaScript at all, and yes, I've got access to code snippet libraries, and I've got access to other things like LinkedIn and stuff where I can get these things. I can even go probably on Stack Overflow and find it
Yeah,
within
Corey
5 minutes.
definitely has it. Like, it's in No Code Supply. It's in FinSuite hacks. There's loads
Yeah.
of solutions.
So this is a really simple example, and it's going. I could go to Claude or ChatGPT and ask it, and it would give it to me in half a second. I could paste it in, off I go. Okay, no one's going to worry. As you said, performance overhead of this is nothing. So then I go, okay, why do I need a whole library? And we'll get into a whole library. Why do I need a whole library for that? And then probably you go, I don't. But as you kind of started to go on, you started to realize that you need additional things. So in the case of going, I just put in the year, my little script that updates the year. So on the 1st of January every year, it changes. And then I'm going, or the client comes to me and goes, it would be cool as if you just put January in there as well. And I'm going, okay, so then you're going back to the script that you found, that you copied, and they don't cater for January or February or March or April. So then you go back to your Claude, your ChatGPT, if you got it from there, and go, okay, now can you change it so it does this? And the thing is, as you start adding features because you want to or your client wants to, this is where the idea of a library starts to grow. Like,
Yeah,
Because
but I'm going to rein you back.
one-off things are,
I'm going to rein you back just one bit. When you started, you talked about when you're using any of like these AI tools are awesome. Like I use Claude, I use for personal stuff, and then at work I've got Copilot. They're amazing. The power behind them is just outstanding. As you said, you just have to the way you would think about coding, you put in your if else statements and it returns it usually quite accurately. And it's very, very good. It's amazing for debugging. It's like unbelievable for finding parentheses and spelling mistakes and all this kind of stuff. The thing, though, that I touched on earlier on when we're using all the other tools like MemberStack and FinSuite is the security. Security is the wrong word, but the the trust when using an attribute over what a lot of these solutions are is classes. So okay, let me get my thoughts proper. You mentioned earlier on that when using JavaScript, you can target IDs, classes, or attributes. In Webflow, we can, with a lot of these snippets that I see online, it's usually targeting current year, dot current year. So in your JavaScript, it's like query select dot current year,
which is a class.
which is a class. In Webflow, a class is the thing you put into the style selector. And if you put in capital C, current, space, capital Y, year, that is the exact same as dot current year. If you put in all
No, it's
smalls,
not. No, no, it'll add a dash between. If you put a space in, it'll add a dash.
that's the point I made. With the space, when you publish that site, the capitals are stripped out, and in the HTML, you've got all small case with a dash. So there is already a disconnect between the visual developer of what they're writing in as a class and then what is actually the target or the selector in your JavaScript. One could easily just go, well, my class has a space in it. I'm just going to put that in to the JavaScript and it breaks. That's a simple example. The other thing is if you start going down the route of using client first, for example, then current dash year isn't semantically correct. It should be maybe like global underscore current year. And so now you've got to, if, for example, you hand off your website to someone else, and they're like super nerdy about like having client first on everything. And they're like, I'm changing this to a client first syntax. You've
Yeah.
broken that function.
So what we're touching on here, okay, and this I'm trying to extrapolate it out is yes, there's the idea that you've looked at this, you've looked at say putting a snippet, a JavaScript snippet you get from you know whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's from LinkedIn or whatever, and you paste it in or a clonable, and you've stepped back and gone, what are the potential issues further down the line in the context of Webflow that could arise from doing it this way, which is really good because that's kind of what we're here to do, isn't it? We're here to make something applicable. We're not building it so when the wind blows a bit stronger, it all falls down. We're here to build something solid and something that persists. And in a coding environment, there are lots of things that allow you to do that. But in the Webflow environment, because it is as malleable as it is, sometimes there are different ways that you can break things that you don't think you're breaking it. And there's no warning systems when you're using custom code. So that's what has led you to thinking attributes are a safer way, a more foolproof way of applying these kind of features. But also the critical bit is you will attach documentation to that to kind of wall garden that and say, this is how you use it. If you look at someone like JetBoost and FinSuite attributes have a big set of documentations that explains exactly what you've got to do with attributes on which element, parent, child, collection list, collection item. JetBoost goes one step further and it has a UI that takes you through it really like baby steps. So far so that you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And if you follow the baby steps, it will work. If you miss out a baby step or something changes in the project, or I don't know, you get rid of a class because you clean up a class or something, things can go wrong. You don't know why it's gone wrong. So that's even more of a black box than
That's why
FinSuite.
attributes and like the idea of
That's what
using
everyone settled on attributes. Attributes have become this sort of safe mechanism to
safe
introduce
place.
JavaScript
And the reason
interactions.
why I use attributes more so than IDs is I don't trust IDs in Webflow, particularly IDs around forms, because depending on what happens, Webflow will and have changed IDs. And sometimes, if you change the name of something, then the ID will auto update and your JavaScript breaks. Again, I have to say, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I've watched what other people have done, particularly FinSuite, and how and I remember watching a video by Alex talking about why he loves using attributes in Webflow. And even when he's writing custom code, he uses attributes. And that was when I pivoted from using IDs to attributes, because I was like, oh, it's just way safer in the Webflow ecosystem. But going back to like, there is nothing wrong with using a snippet or Claude or ChatGPT. And I think it was Mike Tyson said, you always have a plan until you get punched in the face. And in web development, that's when your snippet breaks. And that's when your code breaks. And if you copy and paste some JavaScript in and you don't know why it's worked or not working, that's that punch in the face. And that punch in the face can be, as I said, someone changing the naming convention in your page, you doing it by accident, you cleaning up your classes and your class now disappearing because it's not actually bound to anything. Whereas attributes are secure, they're more secure. You can still break things with attributes, but it's very hard to get rid of them. They're always, essentially, they do the same thing. They select something for the JavaScript to do something on. And there's I don't think anything is better or worse, but what I love about HTMX is the more I use it, the more fluent I am in HTMX, and the more I know, I just know the language and the syntax, and I know what will solve a problem. And when you're involved in a library like FinSuite, attributes, you become fluent in that library, or with Visual DX, you become fluent in the syntax, like that. There will be a solution in there, and I don't need to go to use something like Claude or ChatGPT or shit. I never saved that footer year snippet, and now I need to go into my client's project and take it back out of the global body, and put it back into this new project because I never saved it in my starter pack. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the one thing you highlighted there was like stuff breaking. Okay. So that's a massively important bit, I think, because knowing what breaks and how it breaks and why it breaks, it's like insurance. You only need to know that when it breaks. You only need it, when it works, no one cares. Your client probably doesn't care, A lot of our clients in the sort of product building space, there's a lot of checks and balances, and your colleagues probably have your back, and they, pull requests to check that it doesn't clash with other things. And there's lots of developer-centric safety nets put in place in teams. But when we're a little bit more, especially Webflow, I suppose, it's the clients are not as technical. They're not going to hold you to account when this doesn't break, or this is going to break in certain situation. And what I found with because I actually did it, I was using Visual DX for a certain feature, and it couldn't do the thing I needed it to do, because you had built it, for a certain set of use cases. So I went away and I went, okay, well, I'm going to use Claude, and I'm going to ask Claude to help me do what VDX does, but a little bit more. And so off I go, and I spend probably 2-3 hours batting and forth with Claude and working it out, and it's a bit of trial and error, and I'm understanding what it's doing in some instances, but not in others. But I don't care because it's working, Anyway, I put this in, and then the client, comes into me and goes, "Can we do it this way?" I'm like, well, I've just spent 2 hours, 3 hours working out how to do it that way, and you're saying now you want to tweak it and do it this way. And yes, you go back into Claude, you copy and paste your script in, you remind it where you've come from, you ask it different questions, and you can get to a point. But the thing is, the next day you're working on another feature and you need some JavaScript. And then the next day you're working on another feature and you need some JavaScript. And then, I share it with you, or a client shares it with their colleague, and they go, I've just tried it doing this and it's broken. So what I'm getting at is, guys like FinSuite, yourself included, when you build, and HTMX the same, when you build these libraries, the work that goes into it's not just, I'm going to write some JavaScript and stick some attributes in it. There's a process that you go through to sense check it against a lot of different scenarios. And you get in the shoes of a few different use cases. I know you and I back and forth on WhatsApp, and you like, what should you call the attribute? Does it make sense? Does it make sense to this? What else would you want? And I know you speak to other people about it. Like, what do you need? How would you use it? All of that knowledge and feedback goes into this. Even like your date and time. You've got date and time functions. Like, I'll never use them. I used it the other day. There's certain things that you've been through. You've taken it through the wash a few times. You've painted the wall green, and then it's not quite right, and then you've changed the color, and you've done it in a way which means that a lot of iterations has happened to get to that final attribute-led solution. And that's the stuff that a lot of us would do, even if we did it on our own, but even with ChatGPT or Claude, we'd have to go through that process. And I think that's the biggest benefit that libraries bring, aside from the attributes bit. And I think the attributes is a Webflow. It's not Webflow specific, but it lends itself really well to Webflow.
Solution for a Webflow ecosystem.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it adds a bit of safety in there, and it detaches it from using classes. And as you say, it detaches it from the issues you have with IDs, and it makes it, really Webflow suitable. But the biggest thing I find is that the more you start adding stuff to projects, the more JavaScript you add. Now, there are things like Slater where you can have different files and they compile it. But even then, you have to make sure that sometimes certain scripts run before other scripts. Certain scripts initialize. If you're working with tabs, for example, I know you've got your like auto rotate on tabs. You've had to consider that tabs in Webflow initialize at a certain point, and it's with certain actions. So you've stress tested all that stuff and baked it into your solution. And probably the first time you tested it, you're like, it works. And then someone came along and went, I've just broken it because I did this X, Y, and Z a different way. And that's the bit that I find really compelling about using the libraries, is that someone has done the stress testing for me and I'm just applying it. The downside is it's still a little bit of a black box, because if I want to, like the other day with tabs, if I want to say, but I want this to happen, luckily I've got a bat phone into the creator of VDX, which is like midnight. And Ailín, can you, like, your tab solution is shit because it doesn't do this for me. And you're like, Matt, what do you want it to do? I don't have time right now. And I go, can it do this? And then I wake up at 7:00 next morning and you've gone, I've just deployed a new change. Does it work? He's done it again, hasn't he?
Tabs is a really interesting one. And you've also touched on something there where, like, when you're building out a library, you're building for like the 99%. You're not building for the 100%. And you're probably only building for the 95% realistically. And the enhancement of that to try and get it to 100%, it's always a target, but you have to make sure that the 99% of problems will be solved quickly and easily. And I've said this to you as well. It's like with some of these things, it's like, it is possible, but it's not on the roadmap. So go and figure it out with Claude or ChatGPT. And that's when these tools are amazing, because the enhancement that you can add to something, or the customization that you can get quickly and relatively easily, it's insane. Like, relative to what one could have got like 4 or 5 years ago. Like the customization that we can do with JavaScript quickly and easily is just, it's mind blowing. But with all of that, there is risk. There's always risk. There's even risk when using a library. But the thing with a library, remember when we were talking to Glenn about Wiz versus another tech stack? And he was pointing out that in all software development, there's brittleness. But when you're in a system that is supported and has a team around it, even if that team is of one, the brittleness, you're outsourcing that risk of brittleness and the upkeep of that solution. Whereas when you go to ChatGPT and Claude, like you are responsible for all of that potential, like anything that could happen. But going back to tabs, there are so many solutions out there for tabs, for auto-rotating tabs in Webflow. There are tons of them. Refocus has one. There's like you'll find them. There's snippets everywhere. And they all trigger a click event on the tab, which in theory is fine. So the JavaScript says on page load, click the first tab. Then after 3 seconds, click the next tab. Then after 3 seconds, click the next tab. And once you get to the last tab, repeat and continue. And what that does is it changes your tabs, which is excellent. It also triggers the Webflow tab change animation, so you can use IX2, which is amazing. But the downside of that is that it triggers, it's an event, it's an action. A click is an action. So it pulls focus away from other things on your site. So it's terrible for accessibility. So if someone was on your site and they're tabbing through all the buttons, your auto-rotating tabs will keep pulling to the tab, and they won't be able to navigate the site. For less dramatic or kind of circumstances, if you have a form, a sign-up form or a pop-up form, the user will put in their cursor onto the input, and it will stay there for 3 seconds, and then the focus will go back to your tab, and they'll have to keep clicking on each of the inputs every 3 seconds. So that's something that I learned the hard way, because I was like, oh, this is simple, I'll do this. And again, the same kind of thing. I've got my year, I've got my date, I've got my days of the week, I've got my back button. Let's just throw in auto-rotating tabs. And then I do it this simple way. And then I realize, shit, this is really poor for user experience. But then I realized that if I don't have a click event, I can't trigger IX2. So I got to this crossroads of this is a Webflow problem. This is a problem that I need to solve within Webflow, and how do I do it? I tried many things, like destroying the Webflow animation so that they would restart, and it just all became super heavy and complicated. But the solution I ended up with was that I took advantage of probably one of the most underrated power tools in Webflow, which is its native CSS features, like its transitions and its color change and all that kind of stuff. So the solution I have doesn't work with IX2, but it works inside Webflow with Webflow CSS, and it's accessible, and it doesn't pull focus away from other items. So that there is an example of, like, if I hadn't gone down this road and I hadn't built out this library, what would have been the easiest? Because devs are lazy. I'm particularly lazy. And that's probably why I built it. I'm fucking lazy. And I just want to be able to put in an attribute.
The irony of that statement should not be lost on everyone. The reason I built a library for everyone else to use is because I'm lazy. No,
I don't want to keep writing the same code over and over again.
No, but I think this is at the crux of it. This is the biggest pro, I think, of a library, and I'm talking a well-respected library now, not just an any old library. Is you've gone, the reason you've created the library is, yes, you're going to use it again, but you have a community face as well, and you're going, look, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to put it out to the world and put my name to it, I want to make it the best it can be. And credit to yourself is like you have certain values that you want to bake into the product that you're building. I'm calling it a product in inverted commas because it's going, I want it to work with accessibility. And I guess on the other side, you're going, I want it to work when I have a pop-up and someone puts an input form, because you're probably using it on your sites, that you build. But I think that's the thing is it's kind of an iceberg. Is you look at it and goes, it's time tabs. I could do that. That's what I tried to do. I tried to do time tabs. I got there. I was like, Ailín, don't worry, I've got it sorted. Don't worry about it. I got it. And then, but I hadn't tested all those different scenarios that you've been through. And lo and behold, I'd get my client, a week later going, our little pop-up for the event sign up keeps disappearing because it keeps flicking over to this new tab. It's like, but they can't see the tab because the tab's further down the page. So no one knows what's going on. It's just bugging out. And then I have to go in and investigate it. And I can't use any retainer hours for this because I built it in the first place and all these kind of stuff. And that's where you go back to the trusted library and go, well, you've already done all this thinking. You've thought about all these edge cases. And as you said, you might say that they're not edge cases. In my mind, they were edge cases, but you don't treat them as edge cases because you know that they're going to be problems in the future. So I guess that's the benefit. The downside is when I needed to add a few more extra bits to it. If it was FinSuite attributes, for example, I would have to just suck it up and look at a different solution. I was lucky that I pinged you and you open up your laptop, eating your cornflakes, and you just added a bit in and knew, because you knew the code base and you knew that it wasn't going to have an impact on other things. The other thing I want to touch on is the more I say, for example, VDX, and it happened with FinSuite attributes, it happens with everyone, is the more you use something and the different features, the more efficient it becomes to have that sort of CDN loading up in the background to be able to reference. And I know things like FinSuite, they separate out the different elements.
Yeah.
And there are pros and cons with that.
Sorry, that to butt across there, but that kind of goes back to where I started all this. Was what I liked about HTMX, what I love about HTMX, is you put in the one script and then you do your job, you disappear, a new problem needs to be solved. You go back in without needing to do anything else. You go through the documents, you try and figure out your problem. And it's, as you said, it's there in the background for you to call and make it do things. And that's what I was thinking about with Visual DX, is that it's this thing that lives in your Webflow website, that if down the line, if like all you're using it is for footer year, if that's all you're using it for, like probably a bit of overkill. But the way I think about it is that maybe someday your client is going to ask you for rotating tabs. Maybe someday your client is going to ask you for CMS tabs. Maybe someday you need a back button. They didn't think about a back button. And you just have to go in, yeah, no problem. Put in a div, put in VDX back button, I think is the thing, is the attribute. That's it, one attribute. Type in the word back. And if that's in a CMS item, for example, if that's in all your blogs, you just do it once and all your blog pages have a back button now. And that's, and like what you were saying there, if you become fluent in something, and it doesn't matter what you become fluent in, the speed to resolving a solution, it's so quick, and that's way quicker than ChatGPT. Even though you could just go to ChatGPT, you could give me a script for footer year, give me a script for back button, target the ID back button, and it would work just as quick. But the thing that I suppose what I'm trying to do is add that layer of JavaScript on top of Webflow, but inside the designer. And that if devs become fluent in it, that and then this is what we kind of touched on earlier on, the syntax hopefully is going to be so intuitive that you could almost just, without looking at the docs, if you know what you want to do, write it out and it'll do something. It'll hopefully do what you want it to do. But that's the 100% target, but I'm pretty stoked with the solutions that I have so far, and they work well. Some people use, and it's mad how many different how people are using it in such different ways. Like they're using it without even. Was it you that did something where there was an active class or something, and it was completely different to how I envisaged using it? But because you had an understanding of classes and CSS and transitions, you made this really unique thing with it, which is also the power of a library. Is that the library on top of the devs understanding of the tool they're using can be super powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue onto documentation, because that's, I think it's all in my head at least. This is how I look at things. It's the 80/20. It's the like it's such an important part of a library is the documentation, and it goes back to the other way. It's like if you think about when you use, say, Claude or ChatGPT, and you go in, right, can you create this for me? And the real quick way is to just copy paste, off you go, move on. The much better way is to get Claude or ChatGPT to explain what's happening, and then take that explanation and put it somewhere, so either you or someone else can reference that in a way that means that if you want to change something in the future, you can do. The worst thing you can do is just leave it in your ChatGPT history, and then you paste it into your head or your footer, and off you go. And then someone else, the client, picks it up 6 months later because they want to change something and they can't find it, and it's just a load of gobbledygook, and they have to start again. With libraries, FinSuite kind of, I guess, led the way. Is they put a good set of documentation with it. Even then, it's really hard to write good documentation, because in FinSuite, I found it hard. I think they've tried to redo their documentation a good few times. I think they're actually rewriting attributes as we speak. The documentation, I know a couple of their guys reach out to people in the community to go, if we did it this way, is this easier to understand? And that's because you as devs who are writing these often have baked into your knowledge base stuff that other people don't know. And it becomes almost a second nature of using something like VDX or attributes, becomes an Achilles heel when you're writing documents for someone who doesn't know how to use it. But the documentation is really hard to write, because you have to cater for the people who use it every day and are really familiar, and then you have to cater for the person who's just arrived at it because they need a solution today and they've never heard of attributes before, FinSuite attributes or VDX before. So that's a really tricky one, but I think it carries with it a lot of work on your end, but also that is another benefit. If you get a set of really good docs with a library, it adds so much, because you think about it, you can refer to it, back to it again. Good docs show you when things have changed. They'll have versions on the docs, but also you can package it up and give it to your client when you hand over a project. So they might have an internal dev or an internal marketing person who wants to get involved with editing stuff a little bit more. You might have put in, a componentized system that you've just built for them, and you're documenting all of that. Imagine having to do that with all your JavaScript interactions as well. It's like, no, I'm just going to give them reference to docs and, point them in the right direction, and happy days. So I think I'm a big fan of using AI to help you write stuff, because I think the way it's developing at the moment, you can riff off the AI feedback in a way that maybe you couldn't even do 6 months ago. Claude even have different modes now where you can say, can you return it in an explanatory way rather than a brief way, those kind of things. So I think there's lots of value to doing it yourself from a learning point of view. But when you're moving quickly and you're going, I use Mast or I use Lumos because they've done all the hard work for me. I think these JavaScript libraries, inverted commas, JavaScript attribute libraries that we use with Webflow, are just bringing so much value to the table. But it's still in a depends kind of way, isn't it? Like,
completely. Like it's Visual DX has got a CMS Nest solution, And it's super, like it's, in my opinion, the easiest Webflow CMS Nest solution out there. But then it kind of works with FinSuite sort and filters. So what do you do? Like it's not like I haven't built it to work with FinSuite. So it's like you need to make a decision when you're like, but FinSuite's Nest solution does work with its filters and its sort. It 100% does. It's amazing. But it's like when you're using either of those libraries, you're going to have to make a decision there. Do I want everything that goes with this library? Do I just need this particular function with the other library? Or are neither of them suitable and I need to go balls to the wall myself and figure it out? So, yeah, it's like everything in software. It was the exact same when we talked about mass versus client first. Like, at the end of the day, it's probably not going to move over to mass because I'm so quick at writing client first. Doesn't mean, and I kind of think that Mast is probably a more robust developer focused solution. And there's other ones out there as well, like that they look and feel more like traditional CSS. But I'm not moving away from client first anytime soon because I'm just so fluent and adept with it that it's just not, right now, it's not worth my time.
Yeah, and I guess that does touch on one of the watch outs, I suppose, from using libraries is the dependency.
They hook you in.
Yeah, well, it is. I'm doing something very similar at the moment. I'm looking at Lumos as for a project I'm working on. I've been building it in Mast, and there are certain things that are coming down the line. I'm thinking maybe Lumos will be more. And I've seen a few of Tim Ricks's videos on buttons and stuff, and obviously the component system has come in now. A lot more component functionality in Webflow, and I'm going, oh, maybe I'll switch to Lumos. But it's taken me 4 times as long to build with Lumos in the first day than it does with Mast. So I'm going, is it worth my time? And I guess the other thing is you don't know what's behind Lumos or Mast. Are they going to keep up with the developments? Will Timothy Ricks, will he retire on his Patreon income and disappear over the sunset? And, those kind of things. It's the same with VDX or same with FinSuite is, will VDX be maintained over the longer term? And remember, we're talking about sites here that, it exists. So I could take the JS code and stick it somewhere for safekeeping, or you could pull it down off, your CDN tomorrow, and all those sites with all those attributes will just disappear and they wouldn't disappear, they'd mess up. So but that's kind of as you said, that's software. That's literally nearly everything that we work with. Webflow have all these dependencies under the hood, and they have to think about the security and dependencies all day long. Look what happened with WordPress the other day. Like the founder of WordPress, you think, oh, it's all open source. They started ripping stuff up and pulling the rug out of the toolkits essentially. So there is that side of it, but at the end of the day, ChatGPT could put their price up 5 times overnight, or there's lots of things to consider. But I think one I just want to say, like, fair play for actually building this thing, because I've seen you build it from the ground up, from just at your kitchen table going, I'm going to solve this problem, and then you've developed it so there's probably 20 odd features now. Even
It's probably hitting 30 now, yeah.
Yeah, that are useful for people.
There's a few in the code that I haven't even come back to documentation. Documentation is so bloody hard. It's so hard. And there's a few even in the code that I haven't even documented yet. But yeah.
But it says that, you look at FinSuite now, like I think they're rewriting attributes, but they'll have taken learnings from lots of different places and add it in, lots of feedback from their community, from the community at large. And you even look at, something like GSAP. GSAP probably started in the same way. And, a good few years later, Webflow going, well, everyone knows GSAP. It's really good. Someone's thought about all these animation problems, all these animation use cases. We're going to buy it and stick it in our product. So but it's brilliant. I think it's just brilliant. I think it just hits home the power of people creating stuff for the community that then builds up a bit of steam, not because of any marketing plan or any sort of, sort of like smoke and mirrors. It's just because it's useful. It's useful, and it carries on being useful. It will be carried on being used, and that will give you, I guess, as the creator, the energy to put more energy into it, to create more stuff and listen to more feedback, and that's just like a really positive circle of life, rather than this sort of.
What's really cool is with JS Deliver, you can see the amount of hits that your script is getting, and it's just like ticking up. Like it's at these are only small numbers compared to like others people, but it's over 100,000 requests every month, which is kind of mental. Because like the first thing I wanted to do was hit 10,000 requests, which is like just mad.
First hits, like that's such a 1990s
I know JS Deliver called them hits. They also call them
hits.
requests.
Now, your next challenge, I guess, is to put some sort of micro payment on each request. So,
Yeah,
I don't know, you're going to
add
take
it to
like,
a blockchain so that I just become incredibly wealthy.
get a penny per hit. There you go. But no, if you guys, if you're listening and any
But the first thing is
ideas,
we didn't come to a conclusion, and I don't think there is a conclusion with library versus AI
well,
versus it's they're all do use what is most effective for that job at hand. Like there's no right and wrong solution. There's solutions and that's it. And just understand the benefits of one versus the benefits of the other and the downsides of one versus the downsides of other. The downside of a library is most likely the the, the final 1%. Can you do that final 1% or even 0.1% request? Probably not. The benefits of the library is that it's usually it's got someone monitoring it, and there's a bit of support. There is support there. That's it. Like FinSuite, Refocus, there is support there. Even if it's limited, like just the email, there is support. And like, for example, Refocus, they use those solutions. If they're not working on their own websites, they'll fix it. So if something breaks, it's going to be fixed before you even notice it's broken. That actually happened last week. I broke something. No one noticed. It was fixed in a couple of, and I fixed it. But the the benefits of using, even like we didn't even talk about Slater, but they do the exact same thing. Any of these AI tools is the more you ask the same questions or similar questions over and over again, even if you don't want to learn JavaScript, by pure osmosis of seeing it and kind of going, oh, there's a query select. I've seen query select 10 times in the last week. It becomes, you just start to learn more and more about what the JavaScript is doing. So there's that added benefit that if you're even using an assistant to write the code, you are going to learn more. But you might be slower at it, and then all the risk of the brittle side of that code is on you. So it's I don't know which is better. I like
no, and no, you touched on a good, like, first of all, I'd encourage anyone to even like write their own library. Write it as part of your starter kit. If you start to add features in, and if you're using either you're a very good JavaScript developer or you are really good at getting the best out of the AI tools, it's like write your own and see how it goes. One, you'll see how much work goes into it and how much testing and how much edge cases you need to cope with. But I think the key thing is be transparent with your clients as well. Tell them what frameworks you're using. Tell them that you're using AI. Don't hide behind it being your magical solution, because that's just a short-term game. I think clients are interested in doing things efficiently, safely, in the best way possible, and they're completely open. At least all the clients I work with, they're completely open to using as what tools you can get from wherever you can get them from, and that's the kind of nature of development. Gone are the days where it's like, I'm going to build it and I'm not going to tell you how I built it unless you pay me money to be on a retainer kind of vibe, which, those were the dark days of web development where, you held the keys. And, I've got a friend now who can't get the keys to his WordPress site because the developer they don't want to pay the developer any more money, but the developer won't answer the emails unless it gives them more work done. So I think the more they're all public, all these frameworks are public, all these libraries are public, AI is public. Clients can go in and check your code using AI if they even wanted to. So I think just the whole idea of it being public, transparent, powered a lot by the feedback you get from the community, whether it's FinSuite, yourself with VDX, or Refocus, or even like I said, like the stuff on No Code Supply that they source all these snippets from different people in the community. I think that's it's just nice to see, because honestly, like, I haven't been on Stack Overflow for such a long time because the Webflow community has so many solutions floating around there. So many resources out there. Sometimes you have to be quite diligent at bringing them all together. Yeah, as you said, like, use a library, use AI to explain what the library's doing, to educate yourself. We're in a good place. The only thing you can't do is work out what Webflow do in the background to make it all possible, because they're a bit more of a closed shop. Someone get hold of the source codes one day. Anyway, if you've got any thoughts, any feedback, I know, Ailín, you're open to DMs on Twitter and just any feature requests, then you'll get up at 6 a.m. before the house is awake.
Yeah, do. Use it. I didn't expect this to be so Visual DX centric, but
I think it's really good to have to speak to get it from the horse's mouth.
And tell me if it works or not. It does work, but tell me why you can't figure it out. That's the most important thing, because as Matt was alluding to earlier, as you were alluding to earlier on, like, I just know what it does. So sometimes you might look at the docs or something and you're like, that doesn't make sense, which also means it doesn't work because you can't get it to figure it out. But send me some ideas, because if there's anything that you're doing with JavaScript, if I think it's a part of the 90%, I will definitely add it to the code and make your life easier. Hopefully.
There we go. And if you want to sponsor VDX as well, go to the quick start page. You'll see a sponsored link.
Cheers.
There you go. I'm plugging you.
This episode is sponsored by Visual DX.
Well, come on. That's why we do the podcast. We're not a commercial organization here, So, but anyway, well, and if you've got any more ideas for subjects for us to cover on the podcast, send them through, because every week we just riff off what comes into our head that morning. So if you've got any other subjects you want us to cover, they could be really controversial, they could be really interesting, they could be really technical, then let us know and we'll add it to the list, i.e. do it next week.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Bye.
Catch you later. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.